Hello and namaste to everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to yet another episode of On the Mic with Parth. Today we have a very special, a super inspiring young lady on this podcast, Lucy Westlake from the US. She is the youngest American woman to ever climb Mount Everest. She climbed Everest at the age of 18 back in 2022, and she is also the youngest person to climb all the 50 mountains in all the 50 states in the US, including Mount Denali in North America, in Alaska, a very crazy mountain, a very dangerous mountain, and a very cold mountain to climb. She climbed Denali at the age of 17, and in the summer of 2023 she went on K2 expedition. Apart from all these mountaineering achievements that this young lady has, while I was talking with her, I was just thinking about myself at the age of 18. I had no goals, no dreams, no motivation. I was just another human being thrown around by the wind of life wherever it flows. Unfortunately, most people at that age are like that, and then there are amazing people like Lucy who at the tender age of 18 they do something so phenomenal which shatters everybody's ideas of what is possible and what is not possible. And this is only possible with one pointed focus, extreme hard work, determination, and giving no excuses to no matter what problems come in your life. And if you are ready to put in the work that is needed, then there is no power in the world that can stop you from achieving it. We spoke about many things in the podcast, from her childhood, how she got into mountaineering, how she prepared for climbing these mountains, how she raised the money, and many other aspects related to her life, her expedition to K2, her expedition to Everest, and so many other things. And I would request every young person watching this to watch the podcast till the end. If you climb mountains, if you don't climb mountains, it doesn't matter. A lot of life lessons packed in this 1 hour, and without much further delay, here is the conversation I had with Lucy Westlake. So if you're ready, we can start.
Yeah,
Awesome. So hello and namaste, Lucy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. So what's going on in life right now?
I got back from K2 recently in the
Yes.
summer. Now I've just been with my family. I'm taking the semester off of school. I go to college at the University of Southern California. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the semester off. So I'm just kind of traveling around, training a lot, and I'm going to go back there in January.
What do you study?
I study public policy.
Awesome. And is this something that you see yourself doing a career in, or do you want to climb mountains for the rest of your life professionally?
I'm not sure yet, but I
Mm.
definitely I'm really passionate about the world water and sanitation crisis, so that's why I want to go into the policy side of that. But I definitely see myself climbing mountains for the rest of my life and doing some guiding and things like that. So I would also really like to do that as well.
So before this podcast started, of course, people saw your introduction. How would you introduce yourself to somebody?
I guess it depends who the person is. But if
Mm-hmm.
I was introducing myself like kind of professionally as like a
Mm-hmm.
mountaineer,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that, well, I'm 19, almost 20,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been climbing since I was 7 years old, different mountains in the United States, and now I've gone internationally climbing the seven summits and a few more outside of those. Love the mountains. I'm really passionate about that. I'm also a college student at the University of Southern California, like I said earlier, and I am a runner there. I run on the team. So running has also been a part of my life and one of my passions since I was 6 years old. So doing that, competing in that with my school and club teams is a big part of my life and really how I train for mountains. So that's also a big part of who I am. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd introduce myself.
Awesome. You, as you said in the beginning, you recently went to K2. Now,
Mhm.
K2 is one of the most beautiful yet very dangerous and very difficult mountain in the field of mountaineering. As a mountaineer myself, it's a dream of mine to go to K2, but unfortunately, I don't know if you know this, Indians cannot go to K2 because of the political
Mm.
problems between India and Pakistan. How was K2?
It was amazing. It was definitely it was a difficult experience. It was definitely the
Hmm.
hardest mountain I've ever done.
Hmm.
But it was just incredibly beautiful. And then I met so many awesome people in the mountains.
Mm.
I mean, there's people from all over. It seemed like a lot of the climbing community. This was a big year that a lot of people went to K2. So
Mm.
I met people from all around the world. You know, from Ecuador, from Nepal, um, from Iran. Like if you name it, people were there from those countries. So that was
Mm.
really fun. To be able to make some friends up there, and then just push myself a lot. It was a difficult challenge. I learned a lot for sure, especially with the whole accident that happened up there. Luckily, I never saw the man who actually died, Muhammad, but I was near enough to kind of like see some of the repercussions from that accident.
So, so,
Uh,
so, uh,
yeah.
sorry to stop you. So, for the people who don't know about that accident, can you
Mhm.
explain a bit what happened and what is your perception of it?
On summit day for K2, there was a lot of people trying to summit that day, um, from 100 to 150 people attempting the summit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the conditions were also pretty bad because there was so much snow that had just fallen. So it was very like unstable conditions. There could be avalanches, a lot of avalanche danger was the main issue. We all went up, and me and my group started kind of after everyone else because we knew that we were hoping that everyone would kind of pack the path,
Mm-hmm.
and there wouldn't be as many avalanches later. Fortunately, near the front there was a Pakistani porter who fell. He was hanging upside down. He didn't have the proper equipment, the proper gear. So his whole stomach was like, exposed to the snow. Probably he wasn't able to walk down, so he probably broke something, although we don't know what. But it was just a really bad situation, and it was in a very difficult part of the mountain, the bottleneck, which is super dangerous. There's big seracs above all the climbers, so everyone was kind of like held up there, really anxious and nervous because seracs might fall. So what ended up happening was people just kind of walked over him and walked around him, and he was left there. And some people tried to help him, but there wasn't like an organized effort to get him
Mm.
down. So he
Mm.
ended up dying.
And there was a very big controversy on this
Mm-hmm.
during the K2 expedition, and a lot of, I call them keyboard mountaineers who've never been above 8,000 meters or even 6,000 meters. They have all sorts of opinions about things.
True. That's funny.
You had to turn around on K2. So tell me about it. What happened?
Yeah, well, we made it to below where Muhammad was at the very beginning. We were about to start the bottleneck,
All right.
and there was a huge avalanche that happened because of all the people just waiting and standing above us. Their weight caused a
Oh,
big avalanche that I was in, and luckily, no one was injured. We were all fine. But after that, we decided that the conditions weren't safe enough. That I mean, if there's one avalanche, there's likely going to be more, and
sure.
we were unsure about like what was happening above us, why everyone was stopped. So we decided that it wasn't safe enough and that we were going to go back down.
I have been also caught in an avalanche and I know how it is. So,
Mm-hmm.
when the avalanche was coming, you heard the sound or maybe you saw it. How was
Mm-hmm.
your experience during those few seconds before and after the avalanche? How was your experience in the avalanche?
Yeah. Honestly, hard to even react because it's on you so fast. But
Right.
I looked up and saw it, and it looked like just this giant white cloud above us. And I was like, I didn't even know like what to think about it. I was like, oh, like that's pretty. Like I didn't know what it was really. And then I thought it was almost kind of cool, like a thrilling experience. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's the avalanche. So then I like kind of got down and like shielded my head. That once it was past us, it kind of hit me that I was like, wow, that could have been really bad. There's like a ton of people next to us. Like everyone could have been buried if it was a bigger avalanche.
And that section of bottleneck is known for huge chunks of ice falling off on your heads. On some of my even 8,000-meter expeditions, I've, like, for example, on Annapurna, on Manasulu, when I was there, due
Mm-hmm.
to whatever reasons, conditions were not right, things were not right, and I had to make the decision to turn around. You've invested at least 1 or 2 years and thousands of dollars into going there. The world is watching you, your friends, your family is expecting you to, do that bloody mountain. And then, because of some reason, we have to make that decision to turn around. I see so many people, unfortunately, in today's times who don't have that sense. There is a fine line between bravery and stupidity. Yes, everybody gets tired. Yes, everybody faces hard times, and it's important to push through that. But one should know when to not push your limits beyond the line of safety for success. At the age of
Hmm.
19, you are very young, though it might not feel right now to you that you are very young, but you are very. And at this age, you are able to make the decision of turning around so close, just a few hours away from the second highest mountain in the world. How was your whole mindset during making that decision? After that, do you regret it? And what do you think about it?
My mindset has changed a lot about the whole like turning around and not being able to go to the summit. I know a lot of people do definitely get summit fever, and there is a lot of reasons for that. Like there is a lot of pressure, and you have invested a ton. But the way I've kind of like viewed mountaineering, I kind of had this like mindset switch when I was climbing Denali, which is the tallest mountain in the United States. The first time when I was 13 and went up, I didn't make it to the top, and it was so like crushing to me because I never not made it to the top of a mountain. We didn't even get to try for the summit. There was another group that had an accident and it kind of ruined our summit attempt. So it was just so frustrating. I kind of had like all of those feelings where it's like I invested so much and I didn't even get to try to get to the summit.
Hmm.
I took a step back from mountaineering and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But then I realized like I just kind of felt this like calling, like I need to go back to the mountains. I love them so much. I fell in love with them in my time. And when I did go back, I just kind of had this mindset of, I'm not here because I need to make it to the summit. I'm here because I
Hmm.
love being here, and I
Hmm.
love like pushing myself as hard as I can. And, when you are at the end of your line and you feel like you have to go back down and you push through that, like that's what I love. The beauty in the mountains too. Like there's so many other reasons to be there other than the summit that the summit's like, of course, the goal. Like you really want to make it to the summit, but I really had a lot of peace when I was like turning around on K2,
Hmm.
because I knew that I was proud of myself for all that I had done to get to that point. I knew that, I could go farther physically if I had the chance, but it's not worth it. Like
Hmm.
I did what I wanted to accomplish on that mountain. So I did have a lot of peace. And then when like later when you get back to base camp, you're like, yeah, it does hit a little bit that you're like, oh man, like I wish I could have gone to the summit. But then I still kind of have like this piece. Like I almost don't really view it as a failure anymore. I definitely did on Denali, but now I'm like, that was the right decision.
Awesome, awesome. And as you said, you didn't look at it as failure. And my documentary that I made on Annapurna, which is on YouTube, I called it, the documentary is called My Successful Failure. Though I had to turn around, in people's eyes, somehow it is a failure. But I
Mhm.
know what kind of experience I've had in 1 month on that mountain, meeting people, climbing to camp one, camp two, camp three, and just experiencing the whole environment each day in the mountains. When you spend up there, it's so much learning and so much just pushing yourself and expanding your own personal boundaries. And I think the only failure in the mountains is if you die or if you lose your fingers and toes, and if something permanent happens to you.
Yeah, it's just like what you view as failure, like if you view the summit as like that's your only goal and you kind of like view that as your kind of measure of success and failure, then that's what you're gonna like. If you don't get to the top, it will be a failure for you. But if you have that mindset of I have other reasons why I'm here, like personal growth and things like that, then if you accomplish that, then that's your success.
Especially in this 2023 spring season, I'm sure you were following it, especially on Everest. There were over 60, 70, 80 rescues that happened. If you look at them, if you study them, if you try to understand them, most of the rescues were avoidable. People push beyond the point of return, like they cannot come back.
Mhm.
You won't reach the point of rescue like this. Things start going bad. And then, if you
Yeah.
don't notice, if you don't have the brains to observe, then you reach there. And they are too blinded by the
Mhm.
pull of the summit fever. Most of the people who summited were rescued from camp 2 to base camp. So they didn't even complete the round trip. And they are claiming it as a successful expedition. So what do you think about this?
That's a difficult situation. I feel like the mountains, especially in the past few years, the 8,000-meter peaks have become almost like a tourist destination, like so
Mm,
popular. Guide companies are doing a great job of marketing, but it's almost too good because they're getting these people that aren't real mountaineers. They don't have
mm,
prior experience in the mountains. They're just people who are, like in shape, like, probably athletes, maybe college athletes, something like that, that are like, I can do this. And they're physically in great shape, but they don't have
mhm,
the experience to
mm,
be on a mountain like Everest, which is extremely dangerous. And if you don't have that experience, sometimes it goes well, and you can hit the summit and go back down. But a lot of times, like we're seeing, like things are going to go wrong. And if you don't have that prior knowledge, you're not going to know what to do. And you are going to have to get rescued. There needs to be a few more like prerequisites. Like you got to have some experience on other mountains, not just be someone who's super just in shape and wants to do this. Because Everest is a big goal of, I mean, it's the tallest mountain in the world. To say you did that is pretty amazing. That's something that you tell your kids, you tell your grandkids. That's a huge accomplishment. But you can't just go straight to Everest. There has to be some build up, some experience.
if you had to give prerequisites, what is the list that you would give? What should you have done
Mm.
before climbing Everest?
That's a difficult question because there's a lot of mountains out there, So,
Bare
uh,
minimum.
yeah, there's so many mountains. So, I mean, you can get experience doing so many other mountains. Personally, I was working on doing the seven summits. So beforehand, I had been to, Denali, Aconcagua, Mount Elbrus, Kilimanjaro. So I had a lot of experience, using the technical tools like you need on Everest, like going on to fixed ropes, using ice axe, crampons. I was really comfortable in all those situations, and I knew the right gear to use. And then I also knew how my body would handle altitude. Everest is 29,000 feet, at least going over 20,000,
Mm,
to see how your body handles altitude.
mm,
Definitely be a prerequisite. And then, doing a mountain that's, pretty technical, something that you do have to use all this gear beforehand would definitely be a great idea as well. And a mountain that's, like difficult. Like, I mean, there's tons of mountains that are. There's in the Himalayas alone, there's like hundreds of mountains that you could do
mhm,
to really like just like really get that mindset, of, I know what it's going to feel like to be on a mountain for weeks, and to have to
mm.
push through that specific mountain that I have in mind. But
Yeah,
there definitely needs to be some mountains like that.
these helicopter assisted summits, like as I said, like they summited and they were brought down in heli, and they are
Mhm.
claiming it as a success. Very strangely, the Nepal government is issuing the certificate of summit. In your perception, do you view that as a successful expedition? Do you view that as summit?
That's interesting because when I was on Everest, I was told, if you have to climb at least from base camp to the top and all the way back down to base camp.
Exactly.
So yeah, I didn't know that people were getting rescued or like helicoptered out of camp two and then claiming the summit. And I think that, at least climbing from base camp upward and then back to base camp,
Mhm.
that should be like what's viewed as the summit. If you get helicoptered to camp two, or like there has to be a line drawn somewhere. You can't just continue being helicoptered further and further up the mountain. So I think
Absolutely.
that base camp would be a pretty good marker.
Absolutely. And I am speaking about this with you because Camp 2 to Base Camp rescue is happening and it is considered as summit. After a few years, maybe they will fly to Camp 2 and Camp 3 and climb from there for 2 days and come back in the heli. That would be considered okay also. Who knows? I mean, if this can be okay, who knows what sort of direction this craziness is going into? How long have you been climbing? When did you start climbing mountains, and how did the introduction to mountains happen in your life?
I started climbing. It was more like hiking when I was seven. So I wasn't doing any like 8,000 meter, even like 6,000 meter peaks then.
Of course.
I just kind of got introduced. Me and my family started doing the tallest mountain in every state. We just kind of stumbled upon. They're called high points. The first high point in the state I lived in. And then we traveled a lot. We're big, so we were like, this is just a great activity to do as a family and kind of like bond that way. So we
Hmm.
started doing those, driving around the country and our like breaks and for vacation and doing some high points. And then it became me and my dad who would do them all together because my brother didn't really like it very much. He's younger than me and he
Okay.
wasn't super into it. So it became me and my dad who started climbing all these high points together. And eventually, that led me to some pretty big mountains like out west, Mount Rainier in Washington
Yes.
is a pretty big one. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mount Whitney is high in elevation. There's
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually I got to Denali, which was my first like really big, like 3 week serious climb.
I saw that you have climbed all the mountains in every state in the US, all the 50. You climbed all of them, I think, before you were 13 or 12.
Yeah, I
So,
done the 49, so all of them except for Denali by
right,
the time I was 12. And
right.
then Denali, yeah, Denali was after that.
How was that? Like it's almost 50 mountains. So how was that? Like you were
Mhm.
very young, you and your father, just two of you climbing these mountains. How do you remember that time?
Honestly, I was so young that sometimes some of them I don't remember.
Yes, I'm sure.
A lot of them I don't remember very well. But
Mm.
when I look back, I just remember it being super incredible experience. Just getting to spend time with my family and it was such an adventure, like going to these mountains. Sometimes we'd show up really late at night and sometimes we'd just like camp and sleep in our car and then get up in the morning and go. Like it was such just an adventure. And we saw so much of the country. Like I don't know
Mm.
anyone else that's been to all 50 states. The
Exactly.
US is it's a big country.
Yes.
That's a lot to go to. So just that alone, like getting to travel so much, was just amazing. So yeah, I
Mm.
look back and it was super cool. And it definitely built, that resilience that I use when I climb now to climb mountains like Everest.
How are these mountains like? How many days does it take on an average to climb the highest peak in every state? How is that like?
Most of like the individual mountains are only 1 day climbs.
Mm-hmm.
But then some of them are like 2 days, three
Mm-hmm.
days, 4 days. 4 days is the most that they are, except for Denali. Denali is a 3 week one.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's really long. But other than that, the most is like 4 days.
Of course, out of those 50, Denali would be the hardest. But after
Mhm.
that, which one was the more challenging one for you? Do you remember that?
Mm, yeah, there was this mountain called Gannett Mountain. It was in Wyoming, and
Hmm.
that one was really difficult. That one, it was it was supposed to be a 5 day climb, but we did it in three, so we shortened it a lot. So that's what made it so difficult. It was a long day, hiking in, and then we camped. And then the next day, it's almost like you had to climb three mountains because there was this big ridge you had to climb, and then you lost all the elevation, and then you climbed to the summit, and then you went back
Oh,
up and back. So that was a really difficult one for me. That was definitely the hardest in my memory. In the Himalayas, Everest was my first one.
okay.
So it's actually the only one I've been to because K2
Right.
technically isn't in the
Correct, correct.
Himalayas. I loved it though. I thought like the trek especially to Everest is just so beautiful.
Hmm.
Even more beautiful than the trek to K2. I enjoyed my trek up to Everest Base Camp. I thought it was just the best. So I
Oh,
really
really?
want to go back. So K2 was like a very deserty kind of hike in, like very dry. And once you got in, like the mountains around you were gorgeous, but Everest was just like this kind of like more lush, like green. You were
Hmm.
by rivers. It was just like the bridges were
Mm-hmm.
amazing to walk across.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed that, and I'd love to climb more in the Himalayas. I can't wait to go back.
How did you train to climb Everest? If we talk about the physical fitness part of it.
For all my mountains, actually, I've never lived anywhere that has mountains around it. I've always lived in kind of a flat area of the country, so it's not like I can just go out and climb mountains for training. So I've been a runner my whole life. So I
Hmm.
use my running for training. I run like 6, 7 days a week, long runs, like hour 30 minute runs. I also do like weightlifting, the muscle to like carry a backpack
Hmm.
and do all that. That's really important. So like my fitness and endurance I get from my running. The strength part, I do a lot of weightlifting and sometimes I go out and like carry a heavy backpack, go and walk some trails, like hike a little bit. That's how I train.
So, what kind of weightlifting did you do? Were you doing weights for individual muscles, or were you doing functional training or CrossFit training?
I'd say it was like more individual muscles. It's actually more focused towards running for K2. I'm on the team at USC. So like the coaches have the whole program set up with our weightlifting. We have a weightlifting coach. Our running coach tells us exactly what to do. So
Yeah.
I just did that training. And I was swimming a good amount, like some swim workouts before, which definitely helped my upper body or like
Hmm.
your full body. Swimming's a great full body workout. But yeah,
Hmm.
with the weightlifting, like we did a lot of like stuff like deadlifting, cleaning,
Yes.
push-ups, pull-ups, all of those things, kind of the classic weightlifting exercises.
Did the coaches build a different workout plan for you for climbing mountains? Because I coach people also. The training routine for long distance running is very different from the training routine in climbing mountains, like for climbing mountains.
Mm,
For climbing mountains, it has to be more elevation based. The muscles would develop in a different way if you are, for example, running on the slope compared to running on the flat. Was it a specific kind of a workout routine built by a coach for climbing mountains, or was it just running workout and it just worked out for you? How was that like?
It was just a running workout. They don't
Mhm.
really like they don't care about my mountain climbing. The reason I'm there, they pay me to run, like they pay for my school so I can run. They don't care about the climbing. They actually most college coaches wouldn't even let me climb mountains. I have very understanding ones that actually let me go out and do it. But no, they would not give me any specific training for climbing. All of that I'd have to do on my own. Yeah, just running, but my whole life I've never trained for mountaineering. I've always just trained for running and
Wow,
it's just kind of, yeah,
it worked
it
out.
correlates well. Yep.
Interesting, interesting. And I think this is because since, as you said, since the age of 7, you've been climbing mountains. So
hmm
basically, your body and your mind grew and formed by climbing mountains so much in some ways. So basically,
Yeah.
it comes naturally to you to a very big extent.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And especially the mind part. Like
Hmm.
mountaineering, I always say like it's 90% just mental. Like
Hmm.
you have to have so much mental toughness. And being in the mountains since I was 7 has given me that for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, just alone to just be on the mountain for 3 weeks, not without running water, without, like not being able to wash your clothes. You're wearing the same clothes for like 3 weeks straight. And it's difficult. So just
Hmm.
having that like kind of mental toughness to do that, let alone go and actually climb and push yourself in that way, it takes a lot. So I think that is, that's the main thing that climbing has given me. And it's definitely trained my body too. I feel like my body definitely is just used to kind of like going out and being able to climb a mountain. It knows what it takes.
Because I started climbing mountains when I was 15. Before that, I used to hate sports up to a point
Mhm.
that in our school there was 1 hour a day of physical activity, sometimes running,
Yeah.
sometimes something. I used to go hide in the corner so that they don't make fun. I used to hate it so much. So when I started
It's
climbing
funny.
mountains, it was very difficult for me. Never in my life I even ran like 1 kilometer nonstop. I wish I would have done more sports so it would have been more easier and more natural for me. So what I did not do before, I had to compensate it and work
Mm.
double hard when I was training for the mountains.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it would be so difficult just to go into mountaineering without like having a background in another sport. But it does just make you work harder and gives you that mental preparation. So it could be a good
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. And we speak about the mental toughness part. In mountains, on the level of the mind, something or the other is happening. Even if you're not climbing, you are sitting at the base camp, you have nothing to do. When you are on the mountain, it's difficult. It's hard on the body, hard on the mind. The mind starts making excuses to go down and this and that, the tricks that the mind plays. So when you are having a
Mhm.
tough time in the mountains, how do you deal with that? How are you able to go through it and still climb?
I always like tell myself that I'm here for something like more than myself. That it's nice to have like a higher purpose that you can really call on. Because if you're just doing it for yourself, it would be hard to keep going. And there definitely is just a part of it that is selfish. Like I just love the beauty of the mountains and things like that keeps me going, looking over the next peak. But then I also think about like my family and like how
Hmm.
much they've invested in me, and I think about them like much that they're cheering me on. Through my climbing, I raised like money for water crisis, this charity that I'm involved with,
Mm-hmm.
and then also like on K2, I was getting climate samples like for climate research, water samples. I wanted to get it at each like camp. So things like that, like those like outside motivators that
Hmm.
really keep me going are really good. They quiet the mind right down.
How is the reaction or the state of their minds of your parents when you go on Everest or K2? Are they completely okay with her young daughter going on these crazy adventures?
They've grown a lot with me, like kind of throughout my climbing experience. Like at first, my mom would get really nervous, and she would always support me, but she would get really nervous, like
Pers-
when I went on mountains. But now, like she doesn't. I mean, she still gets nervous, but she kind of knows, like that all of my abilities and that I've done this
Hmm.
before. That she's like confident in me.
Hmm.
So that helps a lot. And then kind of same with my dad. Although he didn't love the idea of K2, because it's such a dangerous mountain. But no, he also really supports me as well.
So why K2 after Everest?
So I'm trying to do the Explorers Grand Slam, so climbing the tallest mountain in every continent, and then also skiing to the North and South Poles. But I've done after Everest, I've done five of them. To go to the North Pole, with the Russian Ukraine war, the North Pole was closed, and then to go to Papua New Guinea, to climb Christian's Pyramid, which is the tallest one in Oceania, that's
Mhm.
also closed because there's like a civil war, like a tribal warfare going on over there.
Hmm.
So that mountain's been closed for a few years. So I wasn't able to do those. And then Antarctica is just so expensive. I need to get some like sponsors or like get scholarships to do that. So I'm working on that. So I couldn't really like complete any of those. So I came up with, something else in the mountains to do. And I was like, well, K2 sounds like it would push me a lot and like it would be a good like next step after Everest. So that's why I went there.
And how would you compare Everest and K2?
K2 is definitely more difficult. It was, I mean, even the trek in was a lot more difficult than the trek into Everest. It was like
Hmm.
longer, more hours. But then the actual, like the mountaineering was just like K2, it's just you're constantly on such a steep slope. Yeah, and like there's no break from it. Every single camp, it's just so steep. Like Everest, sometimes there's like going from camp one to camp
Yeah.
two, it's like it's pretty flat. It's like kind of almost like a easier day.
Hmm.
And there's like different parts that are like kind of like almost like a break, but K2 you don't get a break at all. Going through the Khumbu Icefall is super technical on Everest, but other than that, K2 is a lot more technical as well.
Hmm.
Just going over rock. There's a lot of rock and ice mixture. So
Hmm.
that makes it difficult with crampons on.
How do you raise the money to climb mountains? This is, as a mountaineer
Mhm.
myself, this is the number one question that I get asked because these expeditions, they cost a lot. Everest costs minimum 30, 35, $40,000, close to that. How much did K2 cost?
It was around 40 or 35,000. So
Same.
also, yeah, same as
So
Everest.
absolutely. So in India, especially, it is extremely difficult to raise money to climb mountains
Hmm.
because most people still hear the rich people who have the money to support and sponsor. They don't fully understand this idea of climbing mountains. So when somebody does not understand something, why would anybody support it? So how is, first
Yeah.
of all, the support system in the US? And how did you raise the money?
The main thing that I've done is gotten like scholarship. With Everest, there was a company doing a scholarship that was to support women climbing Everest and going to Antarctica. So I won that. So that basically covered a lot of my Everest climb. So mostly applying for like grants and scholarships,
Hmm.
which is definitely difficult. There's not a ton out there, and there's not a lot of support in the US. All the expensive climbs, I start like a GoFundMe, which definitely helps a little bit. Like most of the time, you're not going to get like an expedition really covered from a GoFundMe. That's only going to be like a little bit of it. So applying for like the grants and scholarships, and especially if you like contribute to like research in some way, like climate research or water research, something like that, you can apply for a lot of grants that way. So that's a big thing of how I've kind of funded for these climbs.
Has it been easy or hard to raise money?
It's been hard. It takes a lot of time.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of time to find the right grants and then, write all the essays that you need to apply. It's a lot of work. You have to submit resumes, things like that. So yeah, it's definitely not easy. That's maybe the hardest part, honestly, of climbing is just raising the money.
Absolutely. I always say, for me, in my personal experience, raising money for Everest was much more difficult than climbing Everest. Personally, for me, it took me 2 years
Yeah.
to raise the funds. And I want
Yeah.
I want to understand how is the support from the corporate world in US and especially the climbing brands, like for example, Columbia, North Face. I see they are supporting a lot of athletes from the US. Any support from these big brands in your expeditions?
No, I haven't really gotten any support from them. I know, like, I guess they have a few professional climbers. So, like, if you were that, then you'd get support from them. But other
Hmm.
than that, they don't just like kind of give out money
Hmm.
to, to anyone.
Of
So it would
course.
be nice. That would be great to be a professional climber for one of them. But so far, I'm not.
Uh-huh. You prepared physically and then you raised the money, and now you are on your way to Everest. I remember seeing Everest for the first time. I climbed Everest from the north side in Tibet in
Mhm.
2019. That's how I always imagined Everest for me was north face somehow, because the first video I saw of Everest when I was 15 years old was 2004 expedition of from the north face. I used to repeat that video months and years, just one video. There were hundreds of
Wow.
videos, but that just that one video. So Everest for me was north. That's why I decided to climb from north. And I remember seeing Everest for the first time. It was a very powerful, very emotional, and a little a little element of, ooh, it's a big
Hmm.
mountain. So when you
Hmm.
saw Everest for the first time, I'm assuming it was on the Everest Base Camp trek from Namche
Hmm.
Bazaar.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't from Namche. I think it was from the town or the where we stayed right before it, the hostel. It was like a really small place. It wasn't like a
Yes.
city. But yeah, I saw it from there, and we just got like a little glimpse of the
Uh-huh.
top of it, and so I couldn't really see all of it, and it's like like full glory, but it was beautiful. I was super just excited and in awe of seeing it, but it was still like far away, so you couldn't really tell exactly how
Yes.
tall it was. But
Yes.
yeah, it was beautiful.
Absolutely. When you see Everest for the first time from the north, basically you drive to the base camp in north. You don't have to trek. There is a
Mhm.
proper concrete road to the base camp.
Wow.
And you cross a pass, you drive up there, and suddenly, boom, five of the highest mountains in the world, Makalu, Lhotse, Everest,
Mhm.
Cho-Oyu, and Shishapangma, all in one eyes frame. These all five 8,000 are there in front of you, but Everest North Face stands like boom, right? Like a boss, like a father to everybody. From the base camp of North, as you know, you can see the whole of Everest. You can't see Everest from the South base camp, but from North base camp, you are seeing
No.
it every day. From the door of the tent, you are lying down and just looking at Everest for hours. And that was very interesting for me to be able to see
Okay.
Everest every day. So, how was Everest for you?
Everest was great. I That was one of my favorite expeditions I've ever done. Maybe my favorite.
Hmm.
Like I said, it was my favorite trek. The trek was absolutely beautiful up there. The tea houses are great. There's good food. I've never been to a base camp that was so like built up, like that had a dining tent and like people
Hmm.
cooking for you. Like that's never been my like image of the mountains before. It's been like, you bring your own freeze-dried meal and like cook it in your tent. So that was it was a great change. It was very
Hmm.
nice. It was very difficult. Like Kumbu Icefall was very difficult. And then, going up to Camp 3 was also,
Hmm.
it was a hard experience, but it was great. I love like the technical side of mountaineering. So I
Yes.
really enjoyed like the Kumbu Icefall. That was
Hmm.
one of my favorite parts. The whole expedition, I was off of the mountain in 27 days. Yeah, it was a fast, smooth expedition. We hit the weather window right. I wasn't really waiting at base camp for very long. It was like maybe like 2 or 3 days before we did our first rotation and 2 or 3 days before we went on our summit push.
What was the hardest part in the whole route for you?
I mean, I think summit day was the hardest. Just because, it's such a long day. We went from camp 4 up to the summit and then back down to camp 2. So that was just like a very, very long day. But I also just like felt really good during that day, like it was hard, but I wasn't like ever like, I can't do this. Like I was pretty smooth sailing and the weather was beautiful. There wasn't too many people at the summit when we were up there. So all in all, it was an amazing experience. It was pretty awesome. The hardest part for me was being away from my family because that was the first mountain I hadn't done with my dad. So it was difficult. I missed my family a lot during that mountain.
Why he did not want to climb this mountain with you?
He did, but it's too expensive to pay for 2 people. I mean,
Of
it's like
course.
so expensive to pay for 1 person. So
Yeah.
there's no way we could have done 2 people.
Describe to me how was the summit experience when you reached the top, when you were on the last slope. There are 2 or 3 humps before reaching the summit,
Yeah.
and you can see the summit. And at that point, you know now nothing can stop you from reaching the summit.
Yeah, the time I was like most emotional was like right after Hillary Step when the sun was just rising and I
Wow.
knew that we were gonna make it to the summit and I was like, wow, like this is amazing. Um and then the actual summit, obviously you're on top of the world. Like
Mhm.
literally. It's just beautiful to like look out and see all the peaks below you. And there's so many of them, so many. It's crazy. It's just the most beautiful scene there is. So I was just, in awe of that. And I was really proud of myself. I knew my parents were going to be proud of me. I was thinking about them, everyone cheering for me back home. So,
Your words just, brought me back to my when I reached the top. There was nobody up there. And I had
oh,
for, I think, 10, 12, 15 minutes, I had the whole top of the world to myself. I was just sitting there,
wow.
and exactly at that time, on the eastern side, next to Kanchenjunga, the sun came up just at the horizon. This was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. I mean, I've climbed many mountains, seen many views, but Everest would always be the most special mountain, no matter which mountain you climb after. Who did you climb Everest with? Who was your Sherpa?
Name was Mingma Ji. He's actually the same Sherpa I climbed K2 with. So I went with this small like company that used Seven Summits Trekking. They used their like base camp and everything like that. It was almost like I was part of their expedition, but the group I went with was called Extreme Climbers. I'm really like close with the head of it. It's a very small kind of new company. So I got to go with the same Sherpa for Everest, and we got along great. He's like a quiet, kind of shy guy, but super nice. He was actually a monk for 3 years before he became a mountaineer.
Oh, really?
But then all his friends were mountaineers, so he was like, "Oh, like I want to do that." So then but yeah, he was like born at a town on the way to Everest and lives there for half of the year and then in Kathmandu for the other half. Yeah, super sweet guy. He's very strong. So I really love climbing with him. And we know each other really well now, kind of both of our abilities.
Is he somebody you would prefer to climb on your next 8,000er?
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love to climb with him again. I think
Yeah.
it's really good to like climb with the same person kind of over
Yes.
and over, you get to know them really well.
On your website and on various things that you write, even on your social media, you have mentioned that you climb to, I don't know if it's a cause or how would you call it, but for women empowerment in some ways.
Hmm.
My question to you, in 2023, especially in the last 2, 3 years, you see women climbers and mountaineers breaking more records and doing crazy climbs more than compared to men. All the big records now are owned by women. For example, just recently, Christine, she's a very good friend of mine. We also recorded a podcast together some time back. She became the fastest person in the world to climb
Hmm.
all the 14 peaks. So many other women are coming up and are, almost leading the mountaineering world now in some ways. So, do you still think that there is this gap between man and women, or do you still think that mountaineering is still a male dominated sport?
I do still think so. Like, especially like in the US and other countries that I've climbed in, like I have seen a lot more women in the mountains, which is amazing to see. It's really encouraging. It means that what you're working for is paying off. Probably like, 10 or 20% women, and mostly men. A lot of like the time, like for example, in like the Sherpa world, like it's basically all men who are like leading expeditions, and being like those guides. And it's just kind of like the perception, that like men are stronger, which is, true, like just physically in some ways, it's just true. But it doesn't mean, that women like can't be guides and things like that and do the exact same things as guys can. And yeah, and when you see these records being broken by women, it's super encouraging. I think there is still work to be done in the guiding world. But
Mm.
yeah, in the mountaineering world, like there's been a lot of strides that have been made.
When we go on these expeditions, sometimes you lose people that are with you. Have you had any close people die on any of these expeditions around you, or have you seen death?
Personally, no. I haven't had anyone that in my group die. I have been like around it. Like on K2, I was, close to Muhammad, but I had never met him, and I never actually saw it or him happen, or him after before. And then on Denali, when I was 13, when our expedition, we didn't get to try for the summit. Someone died, and our guides went on a rescue mission, but I was never part of that. I never saw it. The person, I definitely know it's a reality, and know what's out there. Like on Everest, when we were in the Khumbu Icefall, someone died the day after in the Khumbu Icefall. But definitely been around it, but personally, I haven't really experienced it a lot, which I'm very thankful for.
Do you think about it? Like, for example, every time I go on a major expedition, the night before, I sit down with my family with a couple of beers, and I have this conversation with them that there is a high chance that I will come back. Shit happens, right? Things can
Mm-hmm.
happen, and unfortunately, I've seen a lot of accidents and people dying in my arms, and many crazy things like
Wow.
these. So it does make me more, not scared, but more careful. And it does make me
Mm-hmm.
think more about the possibility of me dying and the consequences of that. See, once, like, if you die, it's done. When you are sleeping, you don't even know that you exist. So when you die, it's the same, I think. You don't even know that you
Mm-hmm.
exist. But the people who are left behind. So do you think about this?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I'm more like kind of concerned the same way, like for the people that, you leave behind, like how it would hurt my family, and the people that are close to me. And yeah, it's definitely a reality. And I think every mountaineer has to decide if it's worth it for them. Because it's not just them, like some people, like especially if you're like a parent, that's another thing to consider, like your kids, if you have a family in that way, and almost glad like I don't yet. So I don't have to really think about that responsibility. But it is like, I mean, when you go into the mountains, you got to know that you might not come back. I think about it more like kind of before and after, but like when I'm like in the mountains, I kind of try to like not focus
Hmm.
on it a ton,
Hmm.
just because I feel like, that fear can really inhibit you sometimes. If it's
Yes.
like when you get blinded by fear, your senses aren't as keen. You can't really focus on climbing as much. So I definitely do think about it, but when I'm like in the mountains, I'm kind of like in the zone, not really like trying not to like worry about it too much.
Why do you think it being so risky climbing mountains? Why do people climb mountains still?
I feel like some people, like me personally, the mountain just call me. Like I can't stay away. After Denali, I did try. I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I just can't stay away from them. They're where I feel like most myself almost, like I feel really free when I'm there. They're just kind of part of like a huge part of my life now since I was 7. So I can't even really remember my life without them. That's like a big reason. When I climb, I become a better person, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's helped me grow a lot, especially if you can help others through your climbing. Like, a lot of people like start, GoFundMe's from their climb that help,
Hmm.
charities, things like that. Like that's just another level.
You are a little young to be thinking about these things. Maybe you have thought about it, maybe you've not thought about it, sorry. In your perception, what is the purpose of life?
Deep question. I think the purpose of life is, I think life's about relationships, I think it's about like how many people you can touch and make their lives better through yours. You can do that wherever you are. It doesn't matter. But for climbing, for me, that's a big way that I feel like I can touch other people, make things better for them using like the gifts I have, the platform I have built through my climbing, and really like leveraging that and making some change, like the things that I want to see change in the world. And sometimes it's like just touching one other person that you were meant to touch, and like changing their life for the better. But it
Hmm.
can also be kind of like a widespread thing too. I feel like it just kind of depends. But yeah, I think that would be, if I could say one purpose, it would be that.
Awesome, awesome. Before we end this conversation, I have a rapid fire round. Do you know what that is?
No.
No. So it's fast questions, fast answers.
Oh.
If time travel is possible, which is that one event in the history where you would like to go back to
Ooh.
and experience it?
I'd say that sometime during like the medieval times, I think that would be like a fun time to be around. Some like big event. I'm not exactly sure which one, but somewhere in that time period.
If this was possible to go to one of the mountaineering climbs or mountaineering events in the history, which climb would you want to be a
Mm.
part of?
Ooh, maybe climbing the Eiger. It was like the last unclimbed thing, like the last, I don't know what they call it, problem of mountaineering
Yes.
that wasn't solved. Maybe that would be pretty cool.
If you were invisible for a day, what would you do?
I would totally mess with as many people as possible.
How?
I would just pull pranks on people all day. I would like be like tapping them on the shoulder and like blowing in their ear and stuff, and then I just not, they wouldn't be able to see me.
What is, in your perception, your biggest weakness?
Hmm. I'd say that sometimes I'm like so focused on my goals and like I'm very like passionate and driven in these things. I don't see how it would affect people around me, you know? Like sometimes I almost become like selfish in those goals.
Hmm.
Um,
What is your biggest achievement in your eyes so far?
Learning how to just like adapt to any situation and really being able to get along with like almost anyone.
In a movie made on your life, which actor should play?
Ooh, I would say Jennifer Lawrence because she's my favorite actor or
Hmm.
actress.
What is your favorite food?
I go through such phases with food, but right now probably sushi. I love sushi.
Oh, okay. Which is your current favorite movie?
Avatar, the one with like the blue people. And then yeah, I love that one. I feel like I was
Awesome.
meant to be Avatar.
Who is your favorite mountaineer?
I think my Sherpa, Mingma.
Oh, that's
Mingma G.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Which is your favorite book?
I really like Catcher in the Rye. I like a lot of books, but that's probably one of my favorites.
Interesting. And which is your favorite mountaineering book? Do you read mountaineering books?
Actually, not really. I don't
Hmm.
really like read a lot of mountaineering books or movies because I feel like they're always about disasters and like the worst thing that could happen. And I'm like, I'd rather just experience it myself. But I
Oh.
did read the Into Thin Air with Everest. That's like the one I've read. So I guess that
Mhm.
would be my favorite because it's the only one I've read.
One book which I would recommend, highly recommend, which has nothing to do with any disasters. It's actually one
Okay.
of my favorite mountaineering books. It's No Shortcuts to the Top by Ed Viesturs.
Oh,
He was the
okay.
first American to climb all the 14, and he did it without O2. And just read that book.
Wow.
It's
Okay, I
something
will.
highly
Good
recommended.
suggestion. Perfect.
Which is your favorite mountaineering movie?
The Alpinist.
If not climbing mountains, what would you be doing?
Probably running a lot. I mean, I run a lot anyway, but I think I would like really dive into that.
What is the first thing that you notice in a human being?
I think their smile. I
Hmm.
really pay attention to smiles.
You know, I knew you would say this. For some reason, I already knew your answer somehow.
That's funny.
You're gonna live a very long life and do many great things, but at the end of your life, how would you like to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone who really lived like purposefully, you know, and that like took every opportunity that I had and just lived like an adventurous life. And yeah, like I said, like touched a lot of people. Was involved with a lot of the people in my life. Had really good relationships.
Awesome, awesome. And one last question. If logic or money, everything was available to you, if there were no limitations, what is that one crazy thing that you would like to do? For example, I
Mm.
want to climb the highest peak on Mars, something like that, or go to the moon. Like
Ooh,
if logic is not a barrier, what is that one crazy thing that you would like to do?
the highest peak on Mars is a really good one. I love that one. But I think maybe I would like I would climb a lot in the Himalayas, maybe the 14 peaks, but maybe some other ones because I kind of want to like do something different, you know? But
Hmm.
I would definitely use it to climb some pretty amazing mountains.
The most iconic question, and that's the name of your Instagram handle. What's next, Lucy?
What's next is soon I will be going back to USC, diving into another school semester, running track there. That'll be really fun. And then this next summer, I actually don't have any mountains planned yet, but I'm applying for a lot of scholarships to go to Antarctica. So hopefully I'll be able to go climb Mount Vincent and also go to the South Pole.
Okay.
So that's what I'm hoping is next.
There are many young people watching this who wish to climb mountains, but they are stuck somewhere because of whatever problems that they have in their life and whatever reasons and circumstances. So what would you say to young climbers such as yourself who wish to do what you have done?
You know, the main thing that I feel like has got to me places is being like a complete optimist. Life is hard, and there's circumstances where sometimes it feels impossible to climb that next mountain or take that next step towards that. But just always believing in yourself, like never giving up that hope. Because once you give up that, it just makes it 100 times harder to do anything. So just keep believing in yourself and like saying yes to any opportunity that comes your way, just seeing where it leads.
Thank you so much for giving me your time and for sharing your story with all of us. And before going, I would like to say one thing to you. I see fire in your eyes and I see so much that you want to do. I wish you all the best. May that fire burn and take you to places and to high mountains and rise within yourself also in some ways. You are a very inspiring lady. From the bottom of my heart, I wish you all the best and God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice talking with you. You're very encouraging. So thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot.